Get off quickly, you fool. Having regained my memory, I vowed to abandon the husband and in-laws who had subjected me to this. Where am I? My name is Meg, and I'm 28 years old. When I woke up, I found myself lying in a hospital bed. As I was confused why I was there, I heard footsteps, and a man rushed into the room. He approached me with an angry look on his face, but I didn't recognize him at all. I don't know this person. Excuse me, but who are you? Meg, are you kidding me? If you're awake, you must be fine, so leave the hospital right away. Being hospitalized is such an overreaction. You're dragging me into this mess. He yelled at me like that. How rude of him to shout at me upon our first meeting. Hearing his raised voice, a nurse and a security guard came running and took the man away. As I was still frozen in shock, my mother, Mary, entered the room, with her eyes filled with tears. Meg, you're awake. I'm so glad. We were so worried about you. But I had no idea what she was talking about. My poker-faced brother Jake was also crying for some reason. My father, Ken, was also teary, stood behind them. According to them, I was found collapsed in front of my house. I had suffered a concussion from the fall and had sustained a large cut on my head that required multiple stitches, but I didn't remember any of it. Since I bled a lot from my head, a neighbor had called an ambulance. That's what my mother told me. Mom, who was that aggressive man who came in earlier? An aggressive man? Now it was my family's turn to be puzzled. After speaking with the nurse and security guard who had taken the man away, we found out that the aggressive man was supposedly my husband. Wait. I'm married? I have absolutely no memory of that. Meg, are you serious? My brother looked at me with a worried expression. Why did I collapse in front of that house? That guy earlier was yelling at me to leave the hospital right away. Do you have amnesia? My mother muttered, then hurried to press the nurse call button. After she explained the situation to the nurse, I was subjected to a series of medical tests. There were too many tests to be completed in one day, and since the test results wouldn't be available immediately, many people came to visit me while I waited. My coworkers brought me my favorite snacks, flowers, fruit, and other get-well gifts, and some even brought me personal gifts. My friends also came to see me one after another, worried about me. But in the midst of all of this, how long are you going to stay in the hospital? Do you know how much money this is costing? Who do you think is paying for this? Leave the hospital as soon as possible. What a lazy wife you are. Get back to work quickly. We're short-staffed because of you. Among the many visitors, the people who said these unbelievable things were my husband Kevin and his parents. When my father happened to witness their behavior, he was initially taken aback by the sight of them that he had never seen before. My daughter has been seriously injured. She's in the hospital because she needs to be. You heartless people shouldn't be saying such things to her. But he soon retorted in a voice I couldn't have imagined from his usually mild-mannered demeanor. Please leave immediately. My brother and mother sided with my father. Please don't come here anymore. That day, I left hurriedly due to my family's fierce stance, but my husband and in-laws still came persistently, complaining and shouting about when I would be discharged and how much trouble I was causing. Eventually, I was moved to a private room, and they were denied visitation. The hospital let me stay in the private room for the same price as a shared room, so I was lucky. The test results showed that I had completely lost a portion of my memory. It felt strange that something like this could happen in reality. The doctor initially suspected a traumatic injury, but since I didn't have any bleeding in my brain despite hitting my head on the concrete road, it seemed that it wasn't traumatic. I was diagnosed with a psychological condition triggered by hitting my head. I really don't understand anything. I can't even remember my husband's face, and I can't believe I was married to him. Apparently, I was married and living with my in-laws. My husband, Kevin, is 35 years old. He was working at my in-laws' store. I was working as a secretary at another company, so we were both working. However, my actions were monitored by Kevin and my in-laws. They took my salary, and it didn't seem like a happy married life. They checked my work schedule, and on my days off, I was helping at the store, ran by my in-laws, without pay. When my salary was deposited, almost all of it was withdrawn, leaving me with no money to use, and I was responsible for all of the household chores as a wife. Despite working the same condition, Kevin would say, "Why do I have to do the housework? Isn't that a woman's job? Don't push your work onto me." He didn't do anything around the house. Moreover, he would blame me for every failure and hurl verbal abuse, like useless and slow-witted, at me. I was also constantly nagged by my in-laws about housework, work, and not being able to conceive a child. I couldn't even get a proper mealtime in this house. Of course, with such a life, it seemed that my exhaustion was accumulating. Kevin used to drive me to and from work, but it wasn't out of love. It was to monitor me, so I wouldn't waste money or take detours. My coworker and friend Betty told me about my married life. I had apparently talked to Betty about my troubles with my marriage to Kevin and living with my in-laws. As I listened to Betty's story, I gradually began to remember the day I got injured. That day, as usual, my husband was yelling at me in the car on our way home from an outing. "You took so long for shopping, and now we're going to be late for our appointment. What are you going to do about it, you slowpoke?" It wasn't my shopping. I was looking for something your mom asked for. If you had helped me to look, we would have finished sooner. Don't make excuses. It's something you were asked to get. Every time I go out with you, I end up in a bad mood. I should have never come along. My husband didn't stop yelling at me for nearly an hour, and when we got home and I tried to get out of the car, my still angry husband said, "Hurry up and get out, you idiot!" And with that, he pushed me out of the driver's seat. I then fell out of the car, hitting my head on the concrete ground. Despite this, my husband didn't stop. He just drove off somewhere. A neighbor saw me lying there, motionless and bleeding from my head, and called an ambulance for me. Since I remembered this, I called the police and told them about the incident. The investigation proceeded. A nearby security camera footage confirmed that my memory was true. When I heard this, my body shook with anger. Why did I have to endure such treatment? I swore in my heart that I would make him pay the appropriate price. Although the fact that I was married to Kevin still feels vague and like someone else's business, my strong fatigue, my emaciated body, and the blood test results all show that my condition was terrible. It must have been the married life Betty told me about. Of course, after being discharged from the hospital, I didn't go back to the house with Kevin and his in-laws, but returned to my parents' home. At my parents' home, I was treated like a princess. "Meg, today we made your favorite, fried chicken. Eat as much as you like. Today, your dad bought a cake. Let's all eat it together later." In this way, my mother prepared delicious meals every day, and my father and brother took great care of me. Thanks to my mother's delicious cooking, my body gradually recovered, day by day. My workplace was understanding, and they told me to take a leave of absence and return to work after fully resting. Because of my life at parents' home, not only did my accident injuries heal, but my body's fatigue also improved, and my hair and skin, which had been in terrible condition right after being admitted to the hospital, became beautiful again. It became clear how much stress I had been under in my married life. Suddenly, anxiety crossed my mind. Does being married mean I have to go back to that house? Such anxiety unconsciously slipped out of my mouth. Don't worry about that. Nobody would force our precious daughter to return to a house that pushed her this far. You should divorce him and cut ties as soon as possible. My mother said so, and after discussing it with my family, they decided to ask a lawyer who was a friend of my father. This lawyer knows me since I was a child and had a long relationship with my father. After hearing my situation, the lawyer, like my family, angrily agreed to help. Thanks to the skilled lawyer, the process of divorce started smoothly. Meanwhile, at the house where Kevin and his in-laws lived, Kevin and his parents were fuming. "When is she coming back? The housework and the store can't run smoothly without her. We need her back as soon as possible." When Kevin said that, his mother-in-law also said, "She's already been discharged from the hospital, right? Why isn't she coming back here? Instead of resting, she should give birth to at least one heir." My father-in-law expressed his indignation as well. "She's such a spoiled wife. When she comes back, we need to straighten her out." In fact, they called my parents home almost every day. "Meg is there, right? Why isn't she coming back here? Her body has recovered, hasn't it? We have a business here, so please let her return as soon as possible." My brother, who had answered the phone, told me what they had said. My family unanimously said that I didn't need to go back, but I wanted to go and get my belongings. I consulted with a lawyer, and my father decided to accompany me. From that day on, my husband's family was in deep trouble. As soon as I entered the house, "How long are you going to stay at your parents' house? What have you been doing without answering the phone? You're such an irresponsible wife. Hurry up and get back to work. There's a mountain of housework and work waiting for you." Kevin and my in-laws started blaming me. As the lawyer and my father entered the room, they were momentarily surprised and closed their mouths. "Why didn't you come back alone? Why did you bring a lawyer? What do they have to do with this?" But then started scolding me again. "Let's sit down and talk for a moment." The lawyer calmed them down and led them to the living room with my father. I went upstairs to my room to pack my stuff. Why did I need to come back to this house? I remembered that I left important evidence of the emotional abuse here. I had kept a diary where I recorded Kevin and my in-laws' words and actions along with the dates. The lawyer told me that it was very important as evidence, and I also had another piece of evidence that I had always hidden from my in-laws. As I was packing, "What's that? Who agreed to the divorce? Don't make decisions on your own." I heard a loud bang on the desk. My body reflexively tensed up, and I crouched down. It seemed that my father and the lawyer had been discussing the divorce. I quickly grabbed my packed belongings and rushed downstairs. Just then, Kevin came out of the entrance and said, "What's with the luggage? Aren't you coming back? Are you the one saying you want a divorce? Explain yourself properly." As he tried to grab me, the lawyer intervened just in time. "Violence is not acceptable." "I'm not being violent. I just want to talk to her." "Hey, you need to talk first." As he tried to approach me again, the doorbell rang with a ding-dong. "Yes? Who is it?" My mother-in-law answered the intercom. "We are the police. Is Kevin Davis at home?" Kevin Davis is my husband's full name. "What business do the police have here?" My mother-in-law's voice trembled. "Could you please open the door if Mr. Davis is present?" the police continued. My mother-in-law hurriedly approached and opened the door. "Excuse us, which one of you is Kevin Davis?" "That's me," my husband replied. "Kevin Davis, you are under arrest for suspicion of assault. Please accompany us to the station." As the police officer announced this, "Huh?" I could hear my mother-in-law gasping for breath. My husband was also clearly shaken, asking, "Why me?" He's apparently perplexed. Yes, after officially filing a complaint with the police about the recent accident, it became a criminal case. Fortunately, security camera footage was available, leaving no room for excuses. At first, he was quietly taken away. "I'm not in the wrong. It's her fault for being clumsy. It's just an exaggeration because I pushed her a little. I'm not in the wrong. Meg, are you listening? Hey, hurry up and withdraw the complaint." He gradually began to shout. As he yelled loudly, neighbors began to gather. At the entrance, "Kevin, why? How come, Kevin?" My mother-in-law cried out. My father-in-law seemed completely dumbfounded. Ignoring my in-laws, my father, the lawyer, and I left the house. Since then, we sent a certified letter demanding a divorce to my in-laws and my husband, citing the incident and the ongoing emotional abuse. The emotional abuse was meticulously documented in the diary I had retrieved from the house. And that day, when Kevin slammed his head on the table and raised his voice, my memory had fully returned. The situation during the emotional abuse had come flooding back, all at once. The voice notes on my smartphone also had careful records of the verbal abuse, and there were a staggering number of them. Nearly 100 records had been left in about a year. There were not only records of verbal abuse from my husband, but also from my in-laws. The triggers were really trivial things, like dinner being a little late or the bath not being prepared. There were recordings of being harshly scolded for such things. "Meg, it's already 7 p.m. and you haven't prepared dinner yet? Why can't you do something as simple as that? Stir fry again? You can't even consider our health. You're really a failure as a wife. What are you trying to sit down for? You don't have time to sit and eat with us. You still have work to close up the store. You're really useless." Such voices from my mother-in-law, and what? The bath isn't ready yet? I told you I wanted to get in right after dinner, didn't I? What have you been doing? You're messing up my schedules. You're really slow at everything. Can't you do anything right without being told? Voices like that from my husband were recorded many times. There were all sorts of verbal abuse, such as being called a failure, useless, a slacker, and slow-witted. Just listening to it for a bit made my body shrink. The diary and voice recorder were solid evidence, so there's no way to deny it. I was able to get a smooth divorce since I had all the evidence. Along with the certified letter, I sent my in-laws a piece of evidence I had brought from the house. It was Kevin's test results. I was often blamed by my in-laws for not being able to have a child, but the cause was Kevin's azoospermia. I kept quiet not to crush Kevin's ego, but it doesn't matter now that we're divorcing. They must have been looking forward to an heir, but they probably couldn't have imagined that their son was the cause of infertility. Kevin was then prosecuted, but even in court, "It's her fault. Bring her here. I did nothing wrong," showed no remorse, yelling. Because of this behavior, the judge's impression of him was poor, and he was sentenced to prison without probation. Not only that, but I also decided to sue my husband for emotional abuse and psychological DV in civil court. I'll make sure to get compensation and cut ties with that man completely. There's no affection left for my husband now that my memory has returned, and I feel relieved to be getting away from him. I can rest easy knowing that I won't have to see him while he's in prison. As for my in-laws, I negotiated using the evidence of emotional abuse and received compensation. At first they argued, "Why should we pay? We have nothing to do with this. If anything, we were teaching her how to be a proper wife, and she should be grateful." But when they found out there was evidence, they probably didn't want their business to be affected, so they paid more compensation than the going rate. However, my in-laws' fears became a reality. It was only natural that their son, who worked with them, got arrested. Rumors spread, such as, "Did you hear? The son of that store pushed his wife out of the car and seriously injured her." They were always bullying their daughter-in-law. Even though she worked outside of the house, the daughter-in-law was forced to work for free at their store. Because of these rumors, the store was far from being able to continue its business. Customers gradually stopped coming, and it seems that the store went out of business just 6 months after Kevin's arrest. They had taken out a loan using their land as collateral, so they lost both their land and savings and ended up filing for bankruptcy. Now, they are living modestly in an old apartment, receiving welfare. I wonder if the three of them will live together once Kevin is released. It's none of my business anymore. "Meg, would you like to go out for dinner tonight?" My boss and current boyfriend Ronald cheerfully asks me after work. Stop it, everyone's still here. "Oh, you two are always so lovey-dovey, I can't even watch." We don't care the teasing from our colleagues. I made a reservation, so let's get going. He pretends not to hear me. A few years after my husband's arrest and since his release, he has been supporting me, always listening to my troubles as I was being harassed by my ex. Eventually, he gave me rides to and from work. One day, my ex approached me suddenly, saying, "Meg, I have something to talk about. Let's live together again. I've changed my ways, so I'm sure we can make it work." Ronald stepped between us and said, "Stop bothering her." My ex fought back, saying, "This has nothing to do with you. It's between me and Meg. Stay out of it." Ronald replied, "Meg is important to me. You need to give up on her already. I'll call the police. I won't hold back if I see you again." Thankfully, I haven't seen my ex since then. Ronald used to play sports, so he has a good physique and a strong face, which was probably very effective against my not-so-large ex. He's also a sweets lover, which is a cute contrast to his tough appearance. He's a wonderful person who always respects my opinions.